als, wenn, and wann. Because all of these essentially translate to English as when, it can be a little confusing to decide which one you need. Also, all three of these are subordinierende Konjunktionen, or subordinating conjunctions, which you learned last year. You may also remember them being called verb kickers, and we're going to remind ourselves how those work. The word als is used when you're referring to single events that happened in the past. There is a spot on your Google worksheet for you to take some notes on this. When I say single event, I mean a thing that happened once and then it was over. Also something that happened in the past, not something that's happening now or that will happen. If you have a story like this one time at band camp, or when I was in kindergarten, since you were in kindergarten once and then you went to first grade and you never looked back, or when I was 5, because you were 5 once and then you turned 6, then als would be the appropriate conjunction to use. In contrast to that, wenn is used for a repeated or routine event. It can be used in any verb tense, the past, the present, or the future. So both of those things make it different from als. Wenn essentially translates to English as whenever, because it's referring to a repeated or routine event, such as, whenever I got sick, I stayed home in bed with my teddy. It's not just one time that I got sick, it's every single time that I got sick. The last one that I want to bring to your attention is wann. This is probably the word for when that you learned in Deutsch 1 when you're asking about a day, or date, or a time. We'll use wann as a conjunction only when we're asking or paraphrasing a question to which the answer is a day, a date, or a time, such as, Frau wanted to know when your birthday is, or your mom asked me when you were coming home. If the answer is September 3rd, or the answer is at 4 o'clock, that's when you would use wann. On your Google worksheet, you have a dialogue between Claudia and her mother, where Claudia is asking her mother about her childhood. I've left the conjunctions out of this dialogue so that you can fill in the correct conjunction, als, wenn, or wann. Let's work through the first one together so that you can see what the thought process should be like. Claudia asks her mother, Wann bist du in die Schule gekommen? And here, Claudia is asking a question, so that's why she uses wann to start her question. But the mother says, blank ich 5 Jahre alt war. Here, the mother is not asking or paraphrasing a question, so we don't want to use wann. We have to ask ourselves, does she mean one time when I was 5 years old, or whenever I was 5 years old? Well, she was only 5 years old once, so als is the correct conjunction to use there. Pause the video now, and when you come back, we'll go over these answers together. Let's go over the answers to Claudia and her mother's dialogue. Claudia asks her mother, Du bist immer in die Schweiz gefahren. Wann war das? And the mother answers, Immer blank wir Ferien hatten. The answer here is wenn. A good clue for why I chose wenn is because she says immer, always, which hints back to that repeated or routine aspect that leads us to choose wenn. Then Claudia asks, Wann hast du mit Englisch angefangen? Mutter answers, Als ich in der 5. Klasse war. Again, being in 5th grade is a thing that happened once, and then she moved on to the next grade, rather than saying whenever I was in 5th grade, which doesn't really make sense. Also, starting with English is kind of a one-time thing. Once you've started learning a subject, you never start it again, you just continue with it. Und in welchem Jahr war das? Mutter says, Ich weiß nicht genau, wann das war. Again, here now she's asking about the year, she's giving potentially what year it was, so wann is the correct choice. Vielleicht 1960. Claudia asks, Und wann hast du Papa kennengelernt? Im Jahre 1962, als wir zusammen im Unterricht waren. Here, meeting somebody kennengelernt is really a one-time thing. After you've met somebody once, then you already know them. So als is the correct conjunction to use there. Claudia wants to know, ihr wart ja jung. Wie oft habt ihr euch gesehen? Mutter answers, wenn wir Zeit hatten und unsere Eltern es erlaubt haben. When it's an answer to wie oft, how often something happens, again, that's a really good indicator for the routine aspect that gives us wenn, whenever. Wann habt ihr euch entschieden zu heiraten? Heiraten means to marry. Ach, ich weiß es nicht mehr genau, wann das war. She doesn't know when exactly that was, but if she did, she would probably give us the year or the date or how old they were. Ich weiß aber, dass ich mich in ihn verliebt habe, als wir zum ersten Mal zusammen getanzt haben. Here, als works because she's talking about zum ersten Mal, for the first time. So that's really a one-time event in the past. Now looking at these sentences, I want to remind you that als, wenn, and wann are subordinating conjunctions or verb kickers. And what you learned last year about what that means is that instead of the conjugated verb being in the second position where you would expect it in these sentences, it's moved to the end of the sentence. So if you were just saying, I was 5 years old, you would say, ich war 5 Jahre alt. But here you have als, so it's moved the conjugated verb war to the end of its sentence. Take a second on your Google worksheet to highlight the conjugated verbs at the ends of the other sentences, and then come back here to check your work. Welcome back. Let's look at the conjugated verbs at the ends of sentences. Mutter says immer wenn wir Ferien hatten at the end. Mutter says als ich in der 5. Klasse war at the end. Mutter says, ich weiß nicht genau wann das war at the end. Hier, als wir zusammen im Englischunterricht waren. Hier, wenn wir Zeit hatten und unsere Eltern es erlaubt haben. Here is a thing I'd want to point out. When you learned the past tense last year, you learned that in the second position would be a conjugated form of haben or sein, and at the end of the sentence would be a past participle. If you have a verb kicker, it kicks that conjugated helping verb to the end of the sentence, right here, all the way past the past participle, erlaubt. Lastly, the mother says, ich weiß nicht mehr genau, wann das war, is at the end of the sentence. Ich weiß aber, dass ich mich in ihn verliebt habe, als wir zum ersten Mal zusammen getanzt haben. Again, here, haben is my conjugated verb. It's kicked all the way to the end, even past getanzt, which is the past participle of tanzen. You know that als, wenn, and wann are verb kickers or subordinating conjunctions. Other common subordinating conjunctions in German are weil, which means because, das, which means that, and ob, which means if or whether. The next exercise on your Google worksheet is Sätze umschreiben, or rewriting, reordering sentences. Last year, you learned how to write sentences that have a conjunction in the middle of the sentence where it joins up two words, in this case, als, which is a verb kicker. And you learned then to kick the conjugated verb to the end of the sentence. There it is, war. However, I want you to think about, als ich in Kindergarten war. What kind of information is that giving you? Is that giving you information about where something happened? Or how something happened? Or perhaps is it even a time expression? In German 1, you learned that time expressions can go at the beginning of a sentence. Well, what happens after a time expression? The abbreviation you learned for it was TEVS. Time expression, then verb, then subject. I take my main clause here and I invert ich habe, which would be subject then verb, to habe ich, so that I have time expression, verb, subject. So I'm rewriting this to als ich in Kindergarten war, time expression, habe ich, verb, subject, sehr oft geweint. I like to call these kinds of sentences verb, comma, verb sentences, because you can check if you've done this correctly by checking if there's a conjugated verb, then a comma, then another conjugated verb right in the middle of your sentence. Take a minute to do numbers 2 through 5 on your own on your Google worksheet, and then come back to the video to check your answers. Welcome back. We're going to check our answers for reorganizing these sentences. For example, number 2 was, meine Mutter hat immer geschrien, wenn ich Ärger gemacht habe. Here's habe, that's my conjugated verb at the end, kicked there by wenn. I'm rewriting it as, wenn ich Ärger gemacht habe, hat meine Mutter immer geschrien. And you can really see here, because I have the colors, my verb, comma, verb in the middle that check that my answer is correct. Number 3, mein Bruder hat gern Monster aus Legos gebaut, als in der 3. Klasse war. Rewrites to, als in der 3. Klasse war, hat mein Bruder gern Monster aus Legos gebaut. Number 4, unsere Eltern haben oft Angst gehabt, wenn wir auf Bäume geklettert sind. Wenn wir auf Bäume geklettert sind, haben unsere Eltern oft Angst gehabt. And lastly, ich habe ein bisschen Taschengeld bekommen, wenn ich jede Woche zu Hause geholfen habe. I can rewrite as, wenn ich jede Woche zu Hause geholfen habe, habe ich ein bisschen Taschengeld bekommen. Does it sound funny to you to have habe, one right after the other in a sentence? I know it sounds weird, but it's actually correct. Now that you've gotten used to that, you're going to answer some questions about your own childhood. On your Google worksheet, you'll see number 6 asks you, wie alt warst du, als du die Schule begonnen hast? I'm going to ask you for your answers to take this time expression suggested by the question and rewrite it as a time expression to begin your answer. So I'm going to take this chunk of the question, als du die Schule begonnen hast, and change the pronoun and the verb conjugation to be about me. Als ich die Schule begonnen habe. You'll notice that the word order is the same. Ich and du are in the same spot. Hast and habe are in the same spot. And I've just changed the sentence to be about myself. Then I put a comma. Then I'll use my conjugated verb. In this case, warst will be war ich. So I again have my time expression, then my verb, then my subject. You'll do the same, then I would essentially say how old I was. Then you'll do the same thing with number 7. You'll take als du in der Grundschule warst and turn it into a time expression about yourself. Als ich in der Grundschule war. Here, I have a comma. My verb is hast gemacht. I'm going to have habe ich, so that I get my verb, comma, verb in the middle. I'm going to keep gemacht all the way at the end of my sentence. So I'll have habe ich, then the name of the teachers that I liked, then gemacht. Finish up the rest of these answers answering about yourself. If you're not sure that you've done any of them correct, flag them and send me a message and I'll see if I can explain it for you. Thank you.